Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the afternoon of the Teaching and Learning with Technology Symposium. It is run by the Finger Lakes Faculty Development Network. Faculty developers, academic technologists at various campuses from Syracuse to Buffalo and almost everywhere in between. Information on this network is on the doors to this meeting room if you wish to join or get more information. And you will see feedback forms on your chairs or near you. We ask you to please fill them out, leave them in the drop box at the back of the room at the end of the session. Without further ado, University of Rochester.
Hi, how you doing? Good. People enjoying the day? I guess I have to use the mic, but I have a very irritating voice, so I apologize to those of you in the audience. I am, as the slide says, Liz Tinelli from the University of Rochester. Please forgive me, I'm going to probably stick with my notes a bit. If I move away from them, I tend to make jokes, and I've been informed repeatedly that I'm not funny. So forgive me if I look down a few times. But what I'm here to talk to you about today is an initiative that actually I took on because somebody said, hey, you should apply for a grant. So I did, and I decided that I would use these new technologies in my classroom, which I'll tell you about in just a minute, but I had no idea how they worked. So they luckily gave me an undergraduate student to help me work through these things. So that was helpful. So what I did in my class was, can people hear me okay without the mic? No? Okay. Was a Google Doc, Wiki, and podcast. So I use these not only to focus on course content, but to also prepare students for the writing that they're going to encounter in their academic as well as out-of-school lives. These assignments require that students not only attend to the purposes and context of writing, but carefully consider audience and assumptions of shared knowledge within multiple genres. What I wanted to make sure I didn't do was to just implement technology for technology's sake. Hey, these things are cool, the kids are doing it, so how about I do it too? I really wanted to make sure I was providing a format that was collaborative, participatory, and knowledge was being distributed among students. I think that students still come in with a mindset that the valuable information is elsewhere and not maybe within themselves and their classmates. Just briefly, I did conduct a survey. It's only 22 students who responded to the survey, so those quantitative people out there, you won't like my numbers. Qualitative people, you might come with me. But I asked people, just generally, did you enjoy this activity? Do you feel you learned anything? Did it help you as a writer? And did it help you to think critically? Just to get an idea of where students were coming from, and I wasn't making broad claims about whether they enjoyed something or not without their input. So first I need to sort of explain, this was all in the context of a Writing 105 class, which I teach. And I need to explain both the class and the students that participated each semester. So the first class is a group of students that come in that it's an extension class, and they choose to be a part of the extension class. They made the decision that they would like to improve as writers. It requires extra class time. There's a whole extra session each week. And it's a smaller class size. They have more one-on-one time with the teacher. And they chose to be in that class. They felt that their writing could use improvement. As opposed to the spring class, where most of my students feel, 13 of them in fact, have pointedly informed me that they're good writers and they're only here because they have to take this class. Right? So you love that as a professor. And you're like, great, fantastic. Since we're all glad we're here, let's move on. So in my first course, 9 of the 10 students were actually English language learners. Their English was either their second or third, and in one case, fourth language. In the spring semester, only one student, English was their second language, and all of the other students, English was their primary language, and they feel that high school really adequately prepared them for writing. I should also say that in the 105E class, students knew each other before coming in. There's a special program for students coming in to come to school 3 weeks early and get to know each other. So this group knew each other, had met me through a couple of classes I taught over the summer, and then opted to stay with me. Fools. So one of the first things I tried out was a Google document. So Colin Lancashire and Michelle Noble, if anybody's familiar with what they've written, they really like to focus on this collective rather than individual intelligence and placing value on distributive expertise rather than authoritative knowledge. So not me lecturing at students saying this is what you should know, them really coming to ideas and conclusions on their own, right? This wasn't a physics class, so I had the luxury of doing this. And I tried to put an emphasis on collaboration. So the way I used this document was to record new and changing definitions of key terms used throughout the course. So this is a writing course, but I have to teach writing about something. We really believe, we have this philosophy that writing is always for a purpose and for a particular audience, right? There's not just writing for writing's sake. So we love to have this notion that composition classes are there to teach across academic areas and to give people the writing they need for life. But really that's an incredibly difficult thing to do because writing will always change dependent upon purpose and context. So the way in which I did this was I tried to provide multiple contexts and multiple audiences for my students so that they could begin to see that it indeed changes. So this was used in class, and it was both individual and collaborative. And when we learn about the course itself, the content I teach is about literacy and identity and culture. So that gives me a lot of freedom. It's a big umbrella for pretty much what I'm interested in that day. So for the Google document, I just took a snapshot. This was day 2 of class with my first group in the fall. Again, this is a group that knows each other, are comfortable with one another. And these were their comments on the Google Doc. So I asked them to define literacy. What's literacy? You know, having the ability to read and write. Most of us can agree with that. Communication in different languages and subjects. Level of education received, right? We talked about math literacy, science literacy. And with the ability of Google Docs to have somebody else's answer pop up right before you when this is a computer tech classroom, so everybody has their computer, and then as students write, you can actually instant message one another through the Google document, but people can see other students writing. So Nyasha said, yeah, I actually agree with Hudson on this one. Literacy to me is how educated someone is. And she expands on this notion and continues to say, she works from his answer but uses it to build a more comprehensive definition that included social responsibility and behavior. She initially links the ideas of literacy to education, but then conceptualizes it as a way of interacting and developing educated opinions. So these educated opinions for her have clear consequences for social behavior, right? This idea of literacy is wrapped up in so much more. So if we jump to day 5 of the Google Doc, you can see here that students are beginning to incorporate ideas from the readings. So now they've read some things, readings that implicate that literacy is so much more than the ability to just read and write. And Hudson begins to write about how his definition has changed based on the readings. But then he recognizes that actually Nyasha already brought up these similar points. So he uses her. I think she said this before we even started the readings. And likewise, Maya and Jameer also pull from the authors as well as one another in creating the revised definitions. The important thing, to me at least, but that I think is worthy to note, is that I didn't require students to cite one another or the readings. I just asked them, how has your definition changed? I only requested that if they got an idea somewhere else, that they cited appropriately. Being a writing class, we like to have that plagiarism discussion and how to cite appropriately and the importance of that. So it seemed like this activity really offered an authentic and natural discussion about how to integrate sources when expressing your own ideas. So later on day 5, Bill actually came late. Somebody filled him in on what was going on. He filled in the first part in black. And then they got talking to each other and decided that they wanted to come up with a group definition together. And this is what they came up with. So where it starts, literacy is the ability to communicate in a certain language. And this is what they came up with. So Jenks and Soliday were 2 of the readings that we had done, but they also were sure to cite a classmate within this. Spring semester, very different sort of thing. So my idea was I was going to learn all this from the fall semester and then make changes to my assignments for the spring semester based on how it was taken up, if it worked, And to me, the Google document had worked. Students reported really liking it in the surveys. They took it up in really great ways, I think, and I have lots of evidence for that. I just picked one very small one for the purposes of this presentation. And then in the spring, I again, sort of I wanted to leave it open-ended, so I gave them vague instructions about what to do, and they immediately, together, collectively, went to dictionary.com to get their definition for culture. And I kind of realized, well, that's not what I was going for. I guess I need to be more explicit with this group. And it turned out this was not the only group. Every single group I had put together, it was a class of 15, so it was groups of 3, everybody had pulled something from the web. So it was from Wikipedia, dictionary, the other big one is Webster. Nobody had developed one amongst themselves. So in looking at the results really quickly, I just thought it'd be nice to have a pretty graph, I don't know. But so enjoyment, right, did they enjoy it? Did it help them as a writer? Did it help them to think critically? So my scores for the first semester were really good, but this doesn't look great because nobody from the second semester appreciated the assignment. They really, I got the groans when it came time to switch to Google Docs, so I've since kind of let it go for the rest of the semester and changed my instruction. But here were some of the comments from students that did appreciate it. So the first 2 are from first semester students and the second 2 are from this spring. But it was nice to know that it was helpful for some people as writers and as thinking about it. So even Abe admits, I'm not a big fan of Google Docs, but they've made me think critically about certain things like how you define culture and language, something I've never taken the time to do before. So it looks like even though people grab things from the web, maybe there's some learning happening. So I wanted to share with you essentially, what I learned and maybe my mistakes as well. So benefits was that there was this instant access to other classmates' work and ability to reference back to ideas in a pretty organized way. The fall semester Google Doc got so long, it became difficult to manage, but here's the wonderful thing. Your students know more about technology than you do. So they informed me that there was a way to create chapters and hyperlinks, so they created an organizational system at the start so that you could click and get right to definitions of culture, or click and get right to the next piece, so that you weren't me. I'm scrolling through, and they're like, Miss, you don't have to do this. So you can learn from your students. But they also learned that there's no right answers. There can be different perspectives. The other lesson I learned is that if you have more than 10 people on a Google Doc, the same Google Doc at the same time, it seriously delays the editing function. And your screen freezes and you can't have, it seems like the magic number is 10. If you have 10 students working on it, you're good to go. As soon as you get that 11th person on, everything slows down, just to keep in mind. So, and also differences in group dynamics, certainly in this case, from my perspective, influenced how it was taken up by students. So, one blog that became many wikis, let me explain. In the fall semester, I decided to implement a class blog. I thought it'd be cool if students had a place to write about their papers in an informal sort of way. Hey, this is the topic I'm going for. What do you think? Do you have any ideas? I was hoping that because students know so much now, and they have so many resources that are out there that we don't even know about, that they could say, oh, actually, here's a great site. Here's OWL, Purdue, different writing websites and different resources for thinking about things. And it worked in that sort of way. For the first semester, I didn't require any comments, but feedback from students or that comments from peers were very helpful, so I then mandated it for the second semester. But for the fall, blogs were a place to share ideas about paper topics. Posting requirements were specific to paper assignments, so that was a piece. I didn't leave it open-ended. I gave them specific assignments to respond to the paper prompt, start to write down ideas of what they were going to do, come up with their claim and some evidence so that somebody else could comment and say whether they thought it was effective or not. And comments I encouraged, but I didn't require students. It wasn't part of the grade, so they didn't have to do it. Spring 2011, I made the students do it. I required that they post comments each week, and I left it open-ended. I wanted to let students, my course also requires a final 8 to 10 page research paper, which I also make them do an actual research project on. And their wiki, what I changed was that they each had their own wiki document, and that was a place to write informally about their topic throughout the semester. So from day one of class, they were already thinking about what their topic would be. So 3 weeks towards the end of the semester, they don't have that panic and then stop showing up to writing class. So from the fall, this was our blog. It's just a screenshot of the top. So a lot of good things were happening here. The problem that we were having was that students would realize that somebody gave them a good comment and they'd be going, you'd have to scroll down pages and pages of blog. If people are familiar with blogs, the most recent post comes first, and then you have to backdate. So it was really hard to search things out. You could create tags, but we didn't know how to create tags on comments. I don't know if anybody here knows how to do that, but we couldn't tag comments, so there was no searchable way to find those unless you knew to which they were responding. But I didn't want to get rid of this activity altogether because really thoughtful, productive things were happening. So here you see Michael's proposal, and I just took a snip of a part of his proposal here for his paper. But you can see he has 9 comments. I didn't make these students do this. They did it on their own accord. And wrote back, amazing, I think your research topic's really good. How do you measure improving in strategy? How is it related to real life? So really like pushing people's thinking and what can you do to make your own work go forward. So, but because it was difficult to search and it became disorganized on the blog, I thought if people could come up with their own organizational patterns on their own wiki pages, that might be more advantageous. So my wiki story is that actually, as the instructor, I spent a significant amount of time sitting down, going over 15 wiki pages each week and responding with what I thought were thoughtful, substantial comments, and nobody was responding to me at all. I had one student respond to my comments, and about 4 weeks in, you begin to feel like you're wasting your time. And I had also modeled my own wiki. I'm keeping a wiki along with students. I'm actually writing all the writing papers I'm asking them to write this semester, and I'm posting them to Blackboard so that they can see them too. And I thought, hey, I'm doing this best practice thing. I'll model this. Nobody commented on my wiki. Nobody wants to talk to the teacher. That's just not cool. But they did talk to each other. The really interesting thing was about week 4, the wiki comments, well, frankly, sucked. It was, well, I don't know what to write about today. My topic is staying the same, or I might change it. I don't know. Have a good day. So I posed to the class, what can we do? What should be fixed? And they're like, well, it'd be nice if we got to know each other better. So I actually came up with 4 questions. What would be your ideal job? Why did you come to the U of R? And questions about them. And they answered. And here is Kristen, who I wrote these beautiful, substantial comments to, didn't comment back to me throughout the semester, and then it came to this, 4th week in, and I write to her, what kind of counselor, this, and she writes back. She has consistently written back to me every week now. So I don't know whether that was she just became comfortable with me as a teacher, she became more comfortable with the wiki, or that because I took a personal interest in her personal life, that she was then interested in engaging in a dialogue with me about her topic. So not that anybody can read this, but just the purple was me. You can see that, her writing went for pages beyond this. And then my purple comments, and then you can see here, this is when I respond to camp counselor. She writes again, I'm purple, and she's blue. And she's consistently, there's no way to show you the entire wiki on a screenshot for a PowerPoint, but I wanted to kind of illustrate it here. And also, as students were able to comment on each other's, it was no longer just the minimum 1 comment requirement. When it became about personal stuff, they were interested. Go figure. They spent all their time on Facebook. I don't know why it didn't dawn on me that they might want to do some of the personal stuff, even on a school site. So one of my students was talking about analyzing some news programs, and these 3 are comments that came right after it. The nice thing about the wiki is somebody has all their thoughts together on one page, and then students can insert a comment wherever they want, as opposed to a blog where it can only go at the end of the post, so you don't know what they're referring to at that point. But wikis do also have comments at the bottom if that's where you feel more comfortable posting. So again, here's the blogs/wikis, and whether students enjoyed it, whether they thought it helped them as writers. So while many might not have enjoyed it so much, you can see enjoyment sort of low, it showed promise for supporting writing, and especially for supporting critical thinking. So, again, a few comments. I really struggled with what data to present here today, because I could definitely give you the negative comments as well. So at first I had a mix, but then I thought it'd be nice for you to see what people had to say about how it helped them. So, again, it really came through that peers' comments were the most helpful. Interestingly enough, it's the thing that they complained about the most was having to comment on peers' work, but everybody commented that it was really helpful to have their peers' input. So benefits were, again, students had the opportunity to be an expert and authority, and they used the space to share resources and ideas, especially more so in the first semester than the second. But the second really happened once I opened it up to personal stuff, and then I've also made it more structured. I've given them more of concrete assignments rather than just free write about your topic. I've given them specific prompts. And another note, you know, the wiki posts are only as good as the question prompt you give them sometimes. But another lesson learned is that sometimes you need a balance between these structured and unstructured assignments, and having a clear method for communicating goals and expectations for assignments is helpful. So lastly is podcasts. So the reason I did this was because I wanted students to think about an audience. Now, Google was class audience, wikis are class audience, and podcasts are now a worldwide audience. So it's getting you to start thinking about people outside of the classroom and the people that know the stuff that we've read and done, and to really articulate what it is you know, what your topic is about, and make it clear to somebody else and catch their interest enough that they'd want to listen to your podcast. So each student creates one podcast during the semester. Again, this pertains to their final research project, and it's a social action project, and I leave this really loose. So it can be that I actually have a student that's upset that he can't smoke near his college dorm, so he's writing a letter and trying to figure out what he can do. I have other students I have one student who actually had the organization Invisible Children come and do a screening at the school. You might wonder what that has to do with writing, but she first emailed the organization and asked if they would come. She emailed organizations around campus asking if they would be interested in hosting them, and created flyers for school. She wrote a write-up for the Campus Times. So, I mean, purpose and audience and this writing appeal, like getting people to buy in and want to go. And she actually had 79 people show up at the film screening, which, if anyone's gone to a film screening on a campus, it's really pretty impressive. And we only had 2 weeks' time. She contacted them. They said, yes, we can be there March 16th, and then it happened. So each student creates one podcast during the semester, and they're required to comment on their peers' podcast. And while I would love to tell you about the lessons learned from the fall 2010 podcasts, the lesson learned is they will disappear. There are podcast hosting sites that are for a limited time. So if you sign up for this beautiful free subscription that they offer you, that's terrific, but you might only have a month, and then they all go away. So the reason I had set up a blog with the first group was actually because I needed a place to host the RSS feed. So I did that through WordPress so that students could access the podcasts through the blog. And then one day, the podcasts were gone, and I don't have backups. So I'm glad you could learn from my mistakes. 50 minutes and you learn something, one thing. Great. So for this spring, I decided to pay $5 a month for Libsyn, which was worth every penny because A, I still have my data, which is always helpful, and two, the usability of it is so much friendlier. It makes sense. You understand how it flows. And here's just a quick screenshot of it. It's 105 change. Students list they have their podcasts. You upload, you click the publish button. And I also hand out instructions to my students, and we do a brief overview of how to publish podcasts. We've been lucky so far, everybody seems to catch on. I did create a handout if you're interested in publishing podcasts or having your students do it. Pretty explicit instructions. My students were able to follow them with no problem and post podcasts. But I thought real briefly, if you were interested in listening to just 2 minutes of one podcast. Oh, and it's going to make me sign in again. So all the students have my username and passcode, because otherwise they would have to pay the $5 too. So it's all, we all share a username. And then these are on iTunes. So it's not just available on the class blog like it was last semester. So here, view the show's previous posts. And this should play.
Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Duncan, and today I want to talk.
Or not. How embarrassing at a technology conference for your technology not to work.
Talk about the relationship between the government and the media. And I know a lot of...
Okay, or not. Well, that was Duncan. He has a great podcast. But you can tell in his podcast he really pays attention to issues of audience and gives the context information and doesn't just say Julian Assange, but explains what's going on so that people who aren't in the know or aren't familiar can follow the argument that he's trying to make about what media should be reporting and the government's involvement with that. Podcasts were the most popular thing to do. The students actually really loved this. This was one of those last-ditch efforts. The director of the writing program said, this doesn't look like a very promising grant. What else can you offer? And a student that was in my class at the time, she was the one who wanted to do this grant with me, so I didn't even want to do this, but I opened it up to my students, and she came to me and said, yes, let's write this grant together. And so then I felt like I had to do it for her, and I came back to her and she goes, what about podcasting? And I said, sure, I have no idea what that is. I've heard of it in stories, and I know it has something to do with you can get it on iTunes. So that was the extent of my knowledge. But it actually turned out to be really significant for students. They really enjoyed it, and they really felt that it helped them in thinking about audience, which was my goal, and in thinking about, and in synthesizing their writing in a way that was concise and would grab reader attention or listener attention. So again, just some comments from students about what they thought of this. Reminding that we're speaking to an audience that eventually needs to understand what's being said. I know that sounds obvious, but for freshman writers, it is not. You'd be amazed. You can tell them, you can try to show them in multiple ways, but for some reason the podcast, it resonated, and they understood this. So benefits, again, great collaborative tool, an audience beyond the classroom, promotes a greater awareness and attention to audience and shared knowledge, and overwhelmingly it was a popular assignment. Be sure that, lessons learned, be sure that your podcasting site is permanent and that you're not going to lose your podcasts one day. Also tagging. So we found out that we're not that searchable through iTunes. There's certain words that we know to search for to look for our iTunes podcast, but we want to change our tagging in ways that we can hit a wider audience. So that's something that we've just begun working on now, because we don't know if other people have subscribed to our podcast, but we do know that we haven't gotten many outsider comments. So we're trying to figure out how to get the word out there more. So, final thoughts, whatever it's worth. Collaboration, distribution, and participation. It's really hard to just make these things happen. I got really lucky with the first semester that this was just a group that automatically fell into that. They knew each other, they worked well together, and it just worked. The second semester, it wasn't as easy. Don't panic over tech stuff. It's okay not to know it all right now. lessons learned, and your students can also help you. So there's also a lot to be said about learning through doing, and I mean you, not just your students. You can really learn how to use these by doing it. And group dynamics matter, just like I sort of said before. So I feel like, I don't know whether it was offering space on the wikis that it got such an uptake in use throughout them, or if it was just that they got more comfortable with each other because of class time, but it significantly improved. Thank you. Questions? Yeah.
The concern I have is the difference between the first group and the second group. Obviously, motivation was very high for the first group and not as high for the second group. But if you had it to do all over again, which you do,
I do.
how would you address the problem with the second group so that you could make them more like the first group?
That's a great comment and great question. So I've thought about this a lot, and it was really, I need more time for them to get to know each other and be comfortable with one another. So I'm thinking more small group class activities early on in the semester to get to know one another, and providing space on the wiki where I'm considering making an additional assignment where you communicate with somebody that's not about your writing project. You don't have to feel like you're an authority or that you know something. It's just an opportunity to say hi to another classmate and introduce yourself, sort of thing. So I'm still working with it and still trying to figure out what my syllabus is going to look like in the fall. Any suggestions I'll take. Yes?
Well, I have a question. I mean, you're from RIT, correct?
U of R.
Oh, University of Rochester.
Yes.
I mean, I'm from Ithaca College. That's a big school, and I was wondering, you seem to feel like you were approaching this kind of all on your own. You tried things out. Like, I don't know what the instructional technology support is at U of R, and if they offer place to host podcasts so you're not stuck, signing up for free accounts, like.
So there's podcasts through Blackboard, but then I wouldn't reach a worldwide audience. So I had that option through Blackboard, but again, that would defeat the purpose of audience. And the tech support was really helpful in offering me audio equipment. So if students didn't have recording equipment, if they didn't have laptops equipped with webcams so that they could just automatically record, they were happy to loan that to me, especially for the tutorial days where we worked through what podcasting would look like. And and I worked with students too through editing podcasts, adding music to their podcasts, for different things. Yeah.
How did you evaluate the students' final projects?
So I have a grading rubric for final projects. Do you mean in terms of writing?
Well, what were some of the stems for your rubric then? Were you evaluating on their participation in the technology, or their writing, or a mixture?
Oh, yes. So that's a great question. So the wiki and the Google document are part of a participation grade. It's really pretty much the entire participation grade that they get, and it makes up 20% of their overall grade. And then podcasts are another 10% of their grade. So these are like substantial components, because I feel as though the Google document, the wiki is the informal writing that they do all semester long, and they have to do it every week. And the Google document is substantial in-class work that they have to do. They have to really formalize their thinking around their writing in order to create definitions and things. Did that answer it? Okay. Yeah.
Again, I'm still concerned with the second group. The first group had relationships when they went into the class. Mm-hmm. It would appear that the second group didn't have relationships when they went into the class. So possibly, the outcome of the first group was due to relationships and the ability to collaborate and the desire to collaborate. So possibly a team building exercise early on in the first class might make a difference, because it would get them sort of over the unfamiliarity with each other. And since it was the second semester, and they were both freshmen, right?
Yes.
The second semester freshman is really like a sophomore. They just don't get it yet. So there may be a problem there. What I'd like to understand is your role. How much did you participate in classroom? I can't get a picture of the setting.
Sure. So the third class, for both sessions, I actually had students do a cultural packet. I had them bring in something that was relevant to that to show their culture. And it's really for students to start thinking, a lot of times white students don't think they have culture. Their immediate thing is, well, I guess my grandmother was German, and they don't look at themselves as possessing culture. So I really try to get them to thinking about that, and so we have to bring in an artifact and talk about it. And this semester, last semester nobody missed class. This semester, 4 students didn't come, and there's students who are continually not participating. So I don't know if it's not feeling welcome in that setting. The other thing I did, which is just a lowbrow trick, is food. I bring in pizza. I brought in a cake for Eric's birthday last week. So it's a dirty trick, right? And we've learned that external motivation isn't what you're supposed to do, but I do. So, so I try to participate in class in ways that I'm a collaborator and not an instructor most of the time. But there's certain conventions that I can't. I still have to grade them at the end, so I can't completely be at a neutral stance with them. And they realize that, you know. And I get a lot from the second group is this what you're looking for? Because I know you're grading me at the end. And I'm really trying to move away from that and say, what do you think your writing should look like? What is your purpose for writing this? And I try to get students to also, I've opened up the wiki for posting their own pieces. So one girl is applying for a scholarship. I said, there's no reason you shouldn't post your application for your scholarship, and we can all help you write this, right? Like, authentic writing pieces is what we should be focusing on as much as possible. So I try to create room for that in class too. I'm still not giving you a good idea, huh?
You are.
Oh, okay.
I was just curious, you mentioned using Blackboard. Did you do any discussion within Blackboard, or primarily all the writing exercises were done in the wiki and the blog?
No, so I have I also use Twitter this semester, and I also use Blackboard discussion board, and Microsoft Word track changes so that everybody posts their papers to Blackboard so that everyone can assess everyone else's papers. Peer review sessions happen there. Peer reviewers then upload the new document that they've made comments on. I then ask students, I then give them feedback too. I then ask students, they then have a document with my feedback and another student's feedback. I then ask them to do something called pushback feedback, where they have to respond to every comment and say, yes, this is a good idea, you're right, I should address this question, or no, this is here for a reason, and here's why. And so many times you go, well, great, just put that language in the paper. You just justified to me why it's here, and that's all that was missing from your paper was the connection to your thesis, but you just said it to me in your comments. And that was really, I made students do because I was annoyed they weren't reading my comments, but it turned out to be a useful assignment. Yeah?
Did you use the Wiki software in Blackboard? Or
I did. Yep, I kept it to the class, and I'm thinking for next semester to make it an outside wiki, but I just didn't, I don't know how I feel yet. I've been reading a lot about public space, and I know a colleague of mine had trouble with her students talking about being gay and having anti-hate speech getting put on there when it was open to the public, so I don't know, I'm wrestling with what to do with that. And I think I'll ultimately let the students vote and decide. And this group voted to have it stay in the class. Yeah.
You said you abandoned the blog in the second semester because the students weren't reacting well?
Oh, they were reacting well. It was hard to find, it was a mess. We didn't organize it in a good way.
So it just worked out better organizationally with the first group, I see.
Yeah, and it just allowed everybody to organize their own page if they wanted, because the blog was one class blog. And then the wiki, everybody has their own individual page. So they can organize if they want the newest thing at the top or at the bottom and how they want it to look. Okay. Yeah.
Did you find any of the students using the blog, same thing they wrote in the blog in their wiki? You know what I'm talking about? Did they kind of duplicate what they wrote in them weeks?
Well, the first group had a blog,
right,
and not a wiki.
Oh, okay.
And then the second group didn't have a blog.
So they didn't do both at the same time?
Right, no.
Oh, okay.
No. But that's actually
we have had that problem where they kind of copy and they do too much work.
Less work if I just cut and paste.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.